High school. When we start rolling out of junior high and hitting the big leagues of sophomore, junior, senior year, we start feeling the pressure. The future, our friendships, graduation, leaving home, paying bills. It's just a lot to think about. If you're in high school, what's your biggest lay awake at night moment? Give us a comment below. Maybe we'll talk about it in a future episode, so make sure you're subscribed. Today we're gonna give some tips on keeping it together when life is falling apart. So hang with me till the end. A few episodes ago in this series, we talked about a teenager who was 12. He was experiencing some new freedom in his life and he ended up in a controversy. But he had built such a good reputation that he was able to navigate a really tough moment with his parents. You can find that episode right here. And let's just say, that's not the story we're talking about today. First, we're hitting the other end of the teenage spectrum. This guy's ready to launch into adulthood. He was experiencing some new independence and honestly a little bit arrogant about his future. And right when he thought he had everything together and it was all perfect and everything was under control, his life began to fall apart. He faced a pretty tough choice, a choice we all face at some point if we're following Jesus. Was he gonna follow God, no matter what the circumstances and no matter the cost? Or was he gonna make decisions based on his circumstances in the moment? Today, we're talking about Joseph. Not Joseph, the stepdad of Jesus, the other Joseph, the Old Testament Joseph, the coat of many colors Joseph, that's the guy, right? Now, Joseph had an interesting family, probably the makings of a reality show today, truth be told. He had 11 brothers. His father had been married twice to sisters. It's a whole story in Genesis, so you should definitely read it. So Joseph's dad is married to sisters, and there's a truckload of babies, and they all live together. His father's wives were super jealous of each other, and the thread of jealousy was actually woven through the whole family. Joseph's mom was the wife that Joseph's dad truly loved, and Joseph was by far his favorite son. You can find that in Genesis 37:3. So blended families, they have their challenges for sure. But Joseph's family, it was a special kind of messed up. Think sister wives over Brady Bunch. His family was pretty wealthy and Joseph was at the top of the food chain in his household. And because of that, Joseph's brothers hated him. And Joseph didn't make the family situation easier. He started having dreams or like these premonitions and he shared them with his brothers. And it's possible Joseph wasn't just being a punk. Maybe he just wanted to find some kind of kinship, friendship with his brothers. I mean, it wasn't all his fault that he was the favored one. But whatever his motivation, all it did was make a bad situation worse. So let's pick it up in Genesis 37:5. One night Joseph had a dream and he told his brothers about it and they hated him more than ever. Listen to this dream, he said. We were out in the field tying up bundles of grain and suddenly my bundle stood up and your bundles all gathered around and bowed low before mine. His brothers responded, so you think you'll be our king, do you? Do you actually think you'll reign over us? And they hated him all the more because of his dreams and the way he talked about them. Soon Joseph had another dream and again he told his brothers about it. Listen, I've had another dream, he said. The sun, the moon, and 11 stars bowed low before me. Genesis 37:5-9. Have you ever done something on purpose just to irritate your siblings like that? If so, give us a like. And if your sibling didn't take that too well, give us a follow. I mean, can you even imagine? There's already tension in the household, literally all the time. And then the baby tells everyone he's gonna be the boss. I mean, come on, what older brother wouldn't wanna put the smackdown on that kid? It's all in Genesis 37. So let's scroll through and see how his brothers were feeling. Starting at verse 12, I'm gonna sum up. Verses 12-14. His brothers are all out working their butts off in the field. Is Joseph there? Nope, he's back at home with daddy. We know this because his dad sends him out to the boys to inspect how well their work is being done. You know, that work that Joseph wasn't doing, that his brothers were doing. Yes, that work. Then in verses 18-19, we see his brothers go off the rails. They just can't take it anymore. So they decide they're gonna off him. Dead, done, R.I.P. Joseph, we hate you, bro. Verses 20-25, Reuben, one of the brothers, kind of comes to his defense. Let's just throw him in this well, guys. We don't have to kill him. It looks like maybe Reuben's plan was to come back later and get Joseph out of the well. You know, the whole like, let's just teach him a lesson kind of thing. And if you've ever watched any show where that's the plan, something always goes wrong. So in verses 26 to 28, we see the brothers hatch a new plan, apparently minus Reuben. Judah, one of Joseph's other brothers, explains that killing Joseph is going to bring a whole vibe with dad that might not be so good. His idea is to make some cash in the process by selling Joseph into slavery, a much better plan. I mean, why just let him rot in a well when we could get something out of the deal, right? Clearly, the communication is not flowing very well among the brothers, because a few verses later, we see Reuben comes back for Joseph only to find him missing, and he panics because apparently Reuben had missed the whole human trafficking part of the story. This family is messed up. Before this point in Joseph's life, he had it made. He was about to enter adulthood. He had his father's favor. He was dreaming about holding a position of power, and he was very confident in his future and in himself. And then everything fell apart. Have you been there? Great plans, perfect future. Then something terrible happens. You're the star of the team. Then you get injured. You're headed to college. The scholarship money doesn't come. You've done everything the doctor said, but you aren't getting better. In fact, you're getting worse. Joseph was in a really bad place in his life, and it's about to get worse. Joseph has built a good name for himself. Definitely lemonade from lemons in the slavery realm of his life. God was blessing him. In verse 5 of chapter 39, it says, the Lord was blessing Potiphar, that's Joseph's owner, for Joseph's sake. He's pretty high up in Potiphar's household. Lots of responsibility, and for a slave, probably lots of freedom. And then things start to get dicey again. Potiphar's wife is pretty into Joseph. She's doing everything she can to cheat on her husband with Joseph. Check it all out in Genesis 39, verses 1 through 10. This was a make or break decision point for Joseph. Think about it. What he did in this situation would have ramifications for his whole future forever. I mean, who had the most influence on Potiphar? Most likely his wife. If Joseph continued to avoid her, his plan for handling her advances thus far, eventually that was going to turn bad for him. But if he gave in to her pressure, also probably bad for him. It was literally a no-win scenario for him. He had no parents, no siblings telling him what to do. He had total freedom and justification to do whatever he wanted to do. He did not have to give an account for himself to anyone but God. Now think about the moment Joseph was in. He'd already had a murder attempt by his brothers, but he was living in slavery. Also cultivated kind of a sweet deal in that moment, honestly. He had the option of moving forward with his sweet deal. And what teenage boy isn't gonna be tempted by the opportunity Potiphar's wife was offering, right? But he decided to follow God's plan for him. Was he rewarded for his good behavior and for making good choices? No, he was not. In fact, he was thrown in jail and was in jail 4 years for a crime that he did not commit. But he was committed to following God no matter the outcome. And after many, many years of bad times and not seeing any visible blessing from God or moving on these dreams that he'd had, seeing nothing for his faithfulness and obedience to God, he wound up in the perfect position for God to make good on all those dreams all those years ago. Long story short, he gets out of prison and he ends up the number 2 guy in charge of all of Egypt. His choice as a teenager to follow God no matter what the circumstances or consequences led him to this perfectly planned moment in his adult life. If he had decided to do things the easy way, if he'd given in to Potiphar's wife, he could have been killed. Or let's assume the affair was never discovered. He would still simply have been nothing more than Potiphar's slave. He would have had an easier life, maybe. And he would have missed God's true purposes for his future. He got that because he trusted God's plan for his future more than he trusted in the circumstances of the moment. Following God is a choice. It's so much more than coming to church and participating in a youth group. Someday we'll all find ourselves in a point of decision, no one guiding us, advising us, or telling us right from wrong. We'll be making those decisions for ourselves. And in that moment of decision, what's going to guide you? Are you going to be the kind of teenager that follows God no matter what reward you get for obedience? Are you going to rise above the circumstances, follow Jesus regardless of the outcome? Or will circumstances be such a distraction in your life? Or will tough times scream so loudly that you'll abandon God's call and direction for something easier? How did Joseph hold it together during those times? He trusted that God had a plan for him, and he didn't deviate from that no matter what the circumstances were telling him. Bro, I'm 55 years old. I still need to keep learning that lesson. He believed the promises of God, no matter how far-fetched, regardless of how others responded to it, even when he didn't see evidence of those promises. and he followed in every circumstance. When things were amazing and he was favored, through all the lies told about him, all the way into prison, and then all the way out of prison and into his purpose foretold in those dreams he had as a teenager. No matter how unclear his future was, Joseph followed God. And he started that when? Yeah, when he was a teenager. Teenagers can do anything. What will you do?